The war began without mercy, without warning, and without time for humanity to prepare, because one quiet moment the sky above Earth was blue and calm, and the next it split open like torn metal, glowing cracks spreading across space as enormous alien ships forced their way through, blocking sunlight and casting long shadows over cities, oceans, and mountains. And people everywhere felt the same fear at the same time as alarms screamed and satellites went dark. Because the Carvel Dominion had arrived, an alien empire older than human history, shaped by endless wars, believing that only strength gave the right to live, and when they came they did not speak of peace or offer terms. They fired first, their weapons burning through orbital stations, destroying defenses that had taken decades to build, turning fleets into drifting fire within minutes. And Earth learned the truth in one terrible hour that humanity was not ready for what had come. Yet even as destruction spread, humans did what they always did when pushed to the edge. They resisted, not because they believed they would win, but because surrender felt worse than death. And so broken ships launched, outdated guns fired, and pilots flew knowing they might not return. And among these people was Commander Elias Rook, a man who had never wanted to be a hero, a man who had grown up ordinary, trained hard, and learned to survive by refusing to quit. Now standing on the bridge of the Yuns Defiant, a ship scarred by old battles, its hull patched so many times that no two plates matched, its engines loud and tired, but still alive, still moving, and filled with a crew who trusted one another more than armor or weapons. And as the alien fleet surrounded them like hunters closing on wounded prey, Rook watched the tactical display light up with impossible numbers. Enemy ships everywhere, human signals fading one by one. And he felt the weight of command settle deep in his chest, not fear, but responsibility, because every order he gave might be the last for someone he cared about. And when the alien commander finally appeared on the screen, tall and sharp and confident, speaking with a voice that held no doubt, telling humanity to surrender and die with honor, Rook answered with quiet defiance, not shouting, not boasting, simply refusing. And that small act alone felt dangerous, because the Carvel believed fear ended wars. But humans had learned long ago that fear could also sharpen resolve. And when the battle began, it was chaos, space lighting up with fire and movement, alien weapons slicing clean lines through human ships, while human missiles struck again and again, sometimes failing, sometimes finding weak points. And the Defiant shook as hit after hit slammed into it, alarms crying out, smoke filling corridors, crew members bleeding and still standing at their stations, refusing to abandon their posts. And Rook moved through the bridge, steady and focused, offering short commands, steady words, because panic spread faster than fire. And if he fell apart, the ship would follow. And one by one human vessels vanished from the display, names blinking out like dying stars. Each one a story, a crew, a promise broken by war, until the Defiant stood nearly alone, battered and burning but still facing the enemy. And the alien fleet paused, confused by the human refusal to retreat, because by all logic the fight was over, yet the human ship surged forward instead, engines screaming, heading straight for the heart of the alien formation, not to escape but to challenge, and this moment defined humanity's place in the war, not as conquerors, not as equals, but as something far more dangerous, a species that fought even when victory seemed impossible. And as the alien commander laughed at what he believed was a final act of desperation, he failed to see what Rook already knew, that wars were not won by numbers alone, that sometimes survival depended on buying time, on standing when falling made more sense. And as the Defiant closed the distance, weapons blazing despite damage, humanity proved its first and most important truth to the galaxy. That even when broken, even when bleeding, even when outmatched, humans would still step forward into the fire rather than bow. And in that burning space above Earth, as ships died and hope thinned, the foundation of the alien empire's defeat was quietly laid, not by strength, but by stubborn, unyielding human will. The Dominion believed they had studied humanity completely. They thought they knew our ships, our weapons, our numbers, and our limits, but they were wrong, because humans had a stubbornness and a cunning the aliens could not measure, a kind of strength that came from refusing to give up no matter the cost. And as the Defiant charged alone into the heart of the enemy fleet, it seemed like madness, a small, battered human ship facing towering warships that could crush it without effort. Yet Commander Elias Rook did not hesitate, because he had learned that desperation could be as powerful as firepower, and the crew followed him with silent determination, knowing their lives might end in minutes but refusing to show fear. And when alien boarding pods slammed against the ship, tearing through hull and airlock, human fighters met them with raw courage, using whatever they had to fight, guns worn out, knives flashing, and bare hands striking where weapons failed, turning corridors into a chaotic battlefield where sparks flew and blood mixed with oil. And the aliens moved with terrifying speed and precision, their 4 arms swinging blades, their armored bodies almost invulnerable. Yet humans fought like predators trapped in a cage, adapting, improvising, using walls, ceilings, and debris to gain advantage. And Rook moved among them, leading, striking, protecting, never stopping, even as he saw friends and crew fall around him, their faces determined even in the final moments, because they understood what was at stake. Not just survival, but the chance to show that humans would never yield. And when the last hallway seemed lost, when the Dominion commander appeared in person, towering and armed with a ceremonial energy blade that glowed and hummed like liquid fire, Rook faced him alone, battered, bleeding, and still standing, knowing that the moment was critical, that all of human will could be measured in this single encounter. And when the alien threw the blade, it moved faster than any human could track, spinning through the air like a streak of white-hot metal. And every alien warrior expected it to strike down the human instantly. But Rook, through sheer instinct, courage, and a will that refused to break, caught the blade barehanded, feeling it burn his flesh and bones as it hummed, pain unlike any he had known shooting through him. Yet he did not release it, because surrender had never been an option, because the human race had endured worse than fire and steel and still continued. And in that corridor, time seemed to freeze, alien eyes wide with disbelief as no species had ever held a Carville weapon, let alone one capable of piercing armor and bone. And Rook's blood steamed, his skin burned. Yet he gritted his teeth and held the weapon, staring into the face of the alien commander. And with one final motion he drove it through the alien, piercing armor and life, ending the immediate threat in a single, impossible strike, and the corridor fell silent. The chaos stilled for a heartbeat as the crew of the Defiant and the boarding aliens alike processed what had happened. Because one human, small and ordinary, had done what the Dominion had believed could not be done. And from the ships outside, sensors registered the change instantly. Because human trickery, ingenuity, and determination had been working in secret. Hidden fleets waiting, damaged ships appearing to be destroyed, weapons offline to lull the enemy into overconfidence. And in that moment, the Dominion realized that they had been deceived, that humanity was never just reacting, but planning, fighting on its own terms, using every perceived weakness as a trap. And for the first time in history, the Dominion fleet hesitated, the rigid formations breaking as commanders struggled to understand how one small human ship could turn the tide with nothing but courage and cunning. And Rook, though injured, did not fall back. Because the fight was far from over, he signaled his hidden forces, and from the shadows of destroyed orbitals, human fleets and salvage ships powered back to life, emerging to join the battle. Railguns firing, energy shields humming, EMPs exploding, boarding teams striking and disappearing before the aliens could respond. And the Dominion realized with growing fear that the humans had been waiting, planning, and baiting them into this trap, that their pride and overconfidence had blinded them, and that the species they had thought weak, fragile, and expendable was now a force that could not be ignored. And in that critical moment, the understanding hit them like a wave. They had underestimated humans in the most fundamental way, believing strength and speed were all that mattered, not recognizing that endurance, courage, adaptability, and the refusal to surrender could turn even hopeless situations into victory. And as the first wave of hidden human reinforcements joined the fight, tearing through alien ships that had considered themselves untouchable, the Dominion's fear grew, commanding officers shouting orders that no one could follow, warriors panicking in formations, realizing that their weapons, their biology, their technology were not enough against beings who fought not because they had to, but because they refused to lose. And in that corridor, with the energy blade still in hand, Rook understood that this single act, holding what should have killed him, had signaled a turning point. That humanity had passed the point of no return, that they would fight to the last breath, to the last ship, to the last heartbeat, and the aliens, seeing it, knew too. That the war was slipping from their grasp. That centuries of assumed superiority meant nothing against the unyielding will of humans. And in the vast expanse of space, battles that had seemed hopeless began to swing as humans emerged from hiding. Allies of the fallen ships rejoining, devices and weapons firing in perfect coordination. Every lost vessel accounted for in strategy, proving that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology or brute strength, but cunning, determination, and the ability to endure, adapt, and strike when the enemy least expected. And as the Dominion fleet faltered, as their confidence shattered, and as human reinforcements swept in like a tidal wave, it became clear that the galaxy had underestimated a species whose resilience was matched by nothing else, and that Rook, small, battered, bleeding, and ordinary, had changed the course of history simply by refusing to release his grip on a weapon that no one else could hold, embodying the truth that humans were unpredictable, unstoppable, and most of all, unyielding. And the Dominion had learned in the most painful and immediate way that the war they had thought won in minutes was now lost, because the humans fought not because they would win, but because they could not surrender, and in that refusal lay the power to turn the tide, to rewrite the rules, and to show the galaxy a species that, when cornered, did not break, did not beg, and did not stop. And for the first time in their history, the Dominion feared humanity not for their weapons, not for their numbers, not for their speed, but for the one thing they could never control, their will. The human counterattack hit the Dominion fleet like a storm that had been quietly gathering strength, because hidden among wrecks and derelict ships were human vessels that had appeared broken, silent, or abandoned, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when they emerged, they did so with speed, precision, and deadly coordination that the aliens could not anticipate. Railguns punching holes through their living ships, EMP pulses shutting down alien engines, and boarding teams teleporting aboard with lightning-fast efficiency, disabling key systems before disappearing again. And the Dominion, who had believed themselves invincible, were forced into chaos, their formations breaking for the first time in their history. panic spreading among warriors who had been trained to expect obedience and control. Because the humans had proven that courage, intelligence, and adaptability could overcome raw strength and superior biology, and on the Defiant, Commander Elias Rook lay slumped against the bulkhead, his body broken, his hands destroyed from holding the alien energy blade, every muscle screaming in pain, yet his eyes still burned with determination. Knowing that the moment of human victory was at hand, and though his life was fading, he found solace in the knowledge that his species would survive, that his sacrifice was not in vain, and beside him, Mara Chun and the remaining crew worked tirelessly, coordinating the fleet, directing fire, and ensuring that every alien ship that could be destroyed was destroyed, while every human vessel that could fight did, moving with a precision that belied the chaos of war. And as the Dominion realized that the humans had not only survived but outsmarted them, a terrifying truth sank in: the war was already lost. Not because humans were stronger, not because they had superior technology, but because they were unpredictable, unrelenting, and unwilling to surrender. And every attempt the aliens made to regroup or retreat was met with devastating counterattacks. Their ships falling one by one, their elite warriors overwhelmed by numbers they had misjudged, tactics they could not comprehend, and a determination they could not break. And across the battlefield, human ingenuity shone, because every weakness the Dominion had assumed existed had been exploited. Traps set, ambushes executed with deadly efficiency. Ships thought destroyed rose again to fire upon unsuspecting enemies, and survivors of earlier strikes joined in, coordinating attacks with skill honed in desperation, proving that humanity could fight smarter, faster, and with more courage than any enemy could anticipate. And as the tide turned, the Dominion command structure began to collapse. Leaders shouting orders that no one could obey. Signals of retreat conflicting with commands to attack, warriors freezing in confusion. And the once proud fleet was reduced to scattered pockets of resistance. And throughout all this chaos, Rook, though fading, remained the symbol of human defiance, because his single act of holding the alien blade, barehanded, had ignited a chain reaction that inspired every human fighter to push beyond exhaustion, fear, and pain. And in that moment, the battle was not just about ships or territory. It was about proving that humanity would endure, that no matter the odds, no matter the losses, no matter the weapons brought against them, humans would continue to fight, adapt, and survive. And as the final alien vessels began to fall, burning in brilliant arcs of fire and plasma, Earth orbit illuminated with the glow of human victory, the Dominion attempted a last desperate retreat. But human ships blocked every exit, cutting off escape routes with precision. And boarding parties seized control of alien vessels, turning their own weapons against them, ensuring that no enemy could leave to fight another day. And at the end, as silence settled over the battlefield, broken and charred fleets floating in space, Rook finally allowed his body to rest, his life leaving him quietly, a faint smile on his lips, because he had seen humanity triumph, because he had led the defiance that turned certain death into victory, because he had proven the truth that would echo through the galaxy for generations. Humans were not the strongest in body, not the fastest in reflex, not the most numerous, but they were the most dangerous in spirit, and the Dominion, who had once thought themselves gods of war, understood for the first time that they had miscalculated in the most fundamental way, and that their arrogance had led them to underestimate a species that refused to surrender,
refused to retreat, refused to break, and from that day forward,
stories of Commander Elias Rook and the Defiant would inspire humans across worlds to remember that courage and determination could overcome the most impossible odds, that even in the face of annihilation, the will to survive and to fight could turn hopelessness into triumph, and that the moment the human caught the blade was not just a moment in a corridor of a starship, but a moment that defined the fate of an entire species, because it showed that humans were unpredictable, unstoppable, and unyielding. And as alien historians would record in trembling voices centuries later, the galaxy learned that the human spirit was a weapon that no force could fully control, and that wars might be won with armies and fleets, but victories against humans were never certain, because humans would continue to rise, to fight, and to endure, and that understanding, painful and too late, marked the end of the Dominion's rule, the end of the war, and the beginning of humanity's place among the stars, a place earned not by arrogance or entitlement, but by courage, sacrifice, and an unbreakable refusal to give up. And the memory of that battle, of that moment, of the human who held the blade when none should have been able to, would remain in the galaxy forever as a symbol that the spirit of humanity was more dangerous, more powerful, and more unstoppable than anyone had ever imagined.